Hafide Todosamzu. Thank you for your participation in today's virtual public hearing. This virtual public hearing is convened by the Guam Trademark Commission that is hosted by the Committee on Heritage and the Arts, Parks, Guam Products, Hagåtña Revitalization, Self-Determination, and Regional Affairs. For the record, in accordance with the open government law, public hearing notices were given to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets, with the first notice being distributed on Thursday, September 24th, 2020, and the second notice on Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. Notices have also correspondingly been published in the Post, and the public hearing notice has been posted on the legislative website since September 24th at www.guamlegislature.org. Today is Thursday, October 1st, 2020, and the time is 5:10 p.m. The virtual Guam Trademark Commission meeting is now called to order. We have 6 members present with 1 or 2 dealing with some internet issues and trying to get in. So we hope that they'll be able to join us. With our 6 members present, that represents a quorum. Saduas Maasi for your virtual attendance on this afternoon's hearing. We will each introduce ourselves for the benefit of the viewing public. And then if you could begin. I'm going to go around in the way that I see everybody on the screen. So Dispenser Zoo, I know everybody sees each other in different order, but if I could have you, when I call upon you, introduce yourself by turning on your microphone, stating your name, and then the agency or entity that you represent so that the viewing public has a clear understanding of who you are as a commissioner and which commissioners are present today. Saduas Maasi. So I'll go ahead and begin that. So I'm going to go to my left and then around this way. I have Dee Hernandez. If you could introduce yourself and then the entity you're representing.
Good day, everybody. I'm Dee Hernandez from the Guam Visitors Bureau.
Ghost Malik. And then to my right, I have Miss Arlene Santos. If you could unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Arlene Santos. I'm the president of the Department of Chamorro Affairs. And I have with me 2 employees who are my management team, and they will be introducing themselves later.
Ghost Malik, yes, very good. And Matt Baza.
Hafide, good afternoon, everyone. Matthew Baza from the Guam Economic Development Authority.
Ghost Malik. And Dr. Sauder.
I am Laura Torres Sauder, and I'm representing the speaker on the commission, but I'm also a member of the Comisión Ifinut Chamorro, which is also actively engaged as a subcommittee.
Ghost Malik. And then we also have Frank Rabone. I think you're not able to, your internet is not strong enough to show you today, but we've been talking beforehand, so we've verified that it's you. If you could introduce yourself and who you're representing.
Today, I'm Frank Rabone. I'm a member of the board member of the Council for the Arts and Humanities, CAHA. I represent CAHA.
Ghost Malik. And then as president or Mas Gahalu, Arlene Santos had mentioned, she has some of the members of DCA here as well. Joe Santos, if you could introduce yourself.
Afternoon, my name is Joe Santos. I'm a planner at the Department of Chamorro Affairs.
Ghost Malik. And is there anybody else, or maybe somebody else might be coming later? Mas Gahalu. So. Yeah, So thank you everybody for your attendance. Like I said, there are one or two others that are trying to make their way in, and we wish them good success. So that represents those that are presently in attendance. And as you see, we have a wide range of expertise, and we are very appreciative of that expertise and your attendance for today. The agenda for this afternoon's virtual Guam Trademark Commission meeting is downloadable in a link contained within the notice emailed to all of the commissioners. I hope that each participating commissioner has been able to download and view today's agenda. It's pretty straightforward. Today's agenda covers the work completed to date by the subcommittees. Additionally, we will discuss any current challenges, if there are those that are faced by the subcommittee. I mean, we are back to PCOR 1. We are always having some internet issues in different locations or different peoples. And if we share those challenges, it's the hope that as a commission, we can provide any assistance or recommendations or share available resources to help each other out. And in that way, we'll be working towards a solid foundation so that each subcommittee is able to function given all of what's going on at this time and in moving the Guam Trademark Commission's work forward. A web link has also been provided in the email on the PDF agenda attachment. The web link directs each commissioner to my office's virtual drive. A copy of our agenda is downloadable there. Also, copies of prior Guam Trademark Commission meeting transcriptions and resources are available so that each subcommittee is able to reference and find information for each of their work. The meeting files are compiled in a committee report format and accessible at iLegislaturan Guahan's website. So, as is typical in our virtual public hearings, let me start with some general housekeeping rules necessary for the conduct on this virtual meeting. The conduct of this virtual public hearing shall be as follows. All participants must abide by rules of conduct and quality assurance standards, including broadcasting from a quiet room with little to no interruptions. The use of virtual backgrounds is not permitted. Broadcasting from a room with adequate lighting, specifically to ensure that a participant's face is not backlit, but visible at all times when speaking. And we do understand it happens from time to time when our internet is not strong enough and it may be audio only. Please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking clearly into your microphone. And the chair will recognize individuals who have been confirmed as participants. And then we shall have the discussion be confined to the substance of the issues on the agenda. And some of my favorite part of our gatherings is our discussion that we do have. We tackle a lot of interesting topics, and I think all of it really helps further the type of work that we're doing. Today's meeting is the Commission's 11th meeting. Our last monthly meeting was held on Thursday, July 23rd, 2020. The fiscal year 2020 budget hearings and sessions occurring in August and September have hampered the Commission's ability to meet in those months. As the Commission's last meeting, at the Commission's last meeting, the Commission also received status reports from the subcommittees that were able to meet. So for the new business item 2, we will receive status updates and oral reporting from each of the subcommittees on their work and accomplishments. So we shall start with the first subcommittee on the agenda. We have the Tangible and Intangible Cultural Art Forms Subcommittee as the first subcommittee. And so Dr. Souder, if you could just provide us updates, any work that was or wasn't able to be accomplished and any challenges that might have been had along the way.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned before, the Comisión Ifinut Zamoro is serving as the core of the subcommittee for this task. And I'm very happy to report that we've incorporated our engagement formally in our meetings and our minutes, and also in our strategic plan, so that we take this responsibility very seriously, and we've incorporated as part of our strategic plan activities for 2021 as well. Now, the challenge that I'm having is to reach out to those folks that indicated that they might be interested in working with us. So what I'd like to suggest is that anyone in the public who might be interested in working in this area as part of the subcommittee, to please let the senator know, so that her team can communicate that information, your contact information, to us, so that we can engage you when we do have our working sessions. The Commission meets regularly every other Thursday, and on the alternate Thursdays, we have work sessions, as we did today, for example. And so one of our upcoming work sessions is going to focus on the basic research that several of us have been doing on intangible and tangible properties, what the UNESCO suggests that we give consideration to, what other Pacific Island communities are giving consideration to in terms of definitions, and in terms of the kinds of protection and misappropriations that might occur relative to tangible and intangible properties. We're especially looking at, in the context of traditional naming of sacred sites, and the protection of the naming of sacred sites as part of that picture. We spent some time today talking about that in our meeting, in our work session. And we're also looking at really recommending strongly that Chamorro names, that traditional Chamorro names, be used in reference to indigenous tangible and intangible properties. So that's basically where the conversations have been so far. We're doing some of the basic research, but because of COVID, because of all the restrictions that we've had, we haven't had the opportunity to really put anything in a report as yet. But suffice to say, Senator, we are fully engaged. We take this very seriously. We're very excited about it, actually, and we're moving forward now that we have the opportunity to hire several more people. We're actually going to have staff that will have assignments related to documenting some of the research that we've been looking at. So we're making progress, but we don't have anything formal to present as yet.
Ms. Maasi, for providing that status update. And that's the thing that we've been talking about all along, that really what we're doing, it's very deep, it's very substantive, it's very sensitive in some ways, and it takes a lot of time to do it properly and for it to be thoughtful, because this is creating a framework that we want to stand the test of time, to stand up against a variety of types of situations or changes in our social and other climates. So it really behooves us, and I appreciate that everybody is as thoughtful as they are, and it just takes time. We cannot rush these things. And especially when we're dealing with, as you're saying, traditional names and so forth, that can take a lot of research and again, a lot of thoughtfulness. So again, we wouldn't want to rush it. So we appreciate all of that thought that the whole commission is putting into this, and the approach that they are taking. So Ms. Maasi for that. And it's good to hear about a couple of the challenges, because the only way that we can overcome them is is to pay attention to them and then to try to mitigate them. So it's important to hear about those. It's actually a little bit hard for me to believe it's been 2 months. It felt like it had been a while since I've seen you, but then when I read the dates, we've all been so busy. On one hand, time has flown by. On the other, it has been a couple of months. So yeah, thank you again for reporting all of that. Is there anything else you want to add before we move on to the next subcommittee?
No, just to reiterate again, anyone is interested, everyone is welcome, whoever has an interest in this area. So please, if you do have an interest, let the senator know so that her staff can direct your contact information to us so that we can engage you when we have our next session or discussion.
Gulf Malik, yes, and please do not be shy. I know that there are people out there that are interested. So please do get a hold of my office. It's pretty easy to get the information for, but I will be stating it at the end. So the next subgroup that we have, subcommittee, is aspects of culture. And this is the Department of Chamorro Affairs, Guam Council on the Arts and Humanities Agency, and Guampedia. So again, I'm not sure if people were able to meet. Along with this, we've also had some reorganization so that people are also still just settling in. And so I'm not sure if people have been able to meet. So if maybe either Mr. Frank Rabone or if Maskehelu Arlene Santos, if you want to just report as to whether you were able to meet or what the status is.
Well, I just want to say that I just came on to DCA in June, and I don't. I'm not familiar with the membership of our subcommittee, but I will assure you that I would meet. I'll try my best to meet with all the committee members, whoever they may be, and see what we can come up with for your next meeting.
Yes, yes. And like I mentioned, I know that you have taken on the additional responsibilities of DCA, and you still are also having oversight over the public library system. So I know we are keeping you very, very busy.
Yes.
Yes, so we appreciate the double duty there. And I know you're a very hard worker. So I know that you will continue to get abreast of this. And then for Tun Rabone, if you could just report, I know CAHA has been very busy. In fact, I think you guys are, with the CARES Act, you're having a grant program that is being launched tomorrow. And so maybe you could just let us know from CAHA's perspective. I think maybe the board has been dealing a lot with the CARES Act grants and things like that.
Well, I know that eventually I'm going to have to reach out with the president of DCA to reconnect with this subcommittee. But currently with CAHA, we've been inundated with the reorganization, and we're trying to put together the issues that we are facing as board members with the administrative staff. So the past 2 months, the last reporting that we gave you in terms of the committee here was status quo. We really did not entertain any form of meeting after that, simply because CAHA was, the issues that CAHA was facing was more of a priority at this point in time. So at this point in time, that's what I can report. And between me and Francis Guerrero, the chairman of CAHA, who normally sits in this committee, we keep in touch. But at this point, we're more focusing on what CAHA needs to take care of with regards to the beginning of the fiscal year. So I eventually will reach out to President Arlene Santos at DCA and inform her about what's been happening since we started.
Seduce Masi. And yes, for Kaha too. Well, actually, just about everybody has gone through some huge transformations. I know that the Commission Ifino tomorrow, I think they are moving into a new building. Kaha might be as well. Kaha has a new administrator. Kaha is having some shift in the board membership. These CARES Act grants are going out, and then they've been restructuring themselves to continue to serve the community to the best of their ability and making what seemed like a lot of real growing steps that the community is going to benefit from. So can I just ask if it's not an issue, is Kaha going to be moving into a facility or a building soon? Is that part of what you guys are doing?
Well, that's just it. We haven't found a building, and now they have to reissue the RFPs, because it went past the deadline and no bidders came in. So the staff is still homeless, for lack of better words. You know, we still run virtual meetings. With Gillette continues to run monthly virtual meetings to keep us posted, but other than that, they're still homeless at this point. We don't have a place for them to really work out of.
Right, and so, yeah, again, I really appreciate everybody's work through this, because everybody's really been handling a lot, a lot of, all of these changes in personnel, location, COVID, dealing with CARES Act and trying to reach out to the community. So I appreciate and completely understand all of this. And then, so it's good to hear from the aspects of culture subcommittee, and we certainly understand. And then for the third group, we have the subcommittee that won, well, no real prize, but kind of won the prize for the longest name of any of our subcommittees. So it's the trademark, image, branding, advertisement, marketing, and sales, including the socioeconomic aspects of trademark policy and enforcement subcommittee. So we have two members who are here. We have Ms. Dee Hernandez from GVB, and we have Mr. Matthew Baza from GITA, who are here. I'm not sure which of you prefers to start the conversation, but it'd be good to hear from both of you about, and again, I know for GVB, there have been some huge adjustments going on over there. Maybe, does anybody have a preference as to who to start? Maybe Ms. Hernandez?
Yeah, I know that the subcommittee has not met since the last time, because Chris has been off island, and I know that Matt was in that last meeting. So Matt, would you like to report on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we have not been able to meet since that last subcommittee meeting, and a lot of the points that we brought up are still there. A lot of them are highlighted more. Some of the aspects about how to make this process not too cumbersome, but still thorough. I think it's even more important now with this shift towards online services and less face-to-face. So I think that's going to need a little bit more thinking about as we move forward. And as you said, Senator, you know, everyone's been dealing with, you know, COVID and the CARES Act and all these things. So, you know, here at GITA and I'm sure at GVB, and I know Reverend Tax isn't here, but I know Reverend Tax, I mean, you just see it in the news that they're inundated with a lot of additional programs. So we're all trying to get a handle on that while we're working on this. That's sort of where we are right now. Like I said, with this move to the more digital, online, and less face-to-face, it's presented some challenges, but also given us more things to think about as we move forward sort of that regulatory side of the shop and the process. So that's where we are.
Seduce Masi, and you bring up very good points, as you always do, Matt. And it's true that so much of our landscape has changed, and maybe in some of the ways that we were thinking about things, this is the time, because of the experiences we've had, and we understand that perhaps our landscape is forever changed in a sense. We do want to update, we do want to modernize, we do want to be more accessible, but we also don't know how long this pandemic's going to last or when the next one is. The other SARS wasn't too many years ago, and here we are again. So that the considerations about how much of this is accessible online, how much of the maybe application process and other things to have be online, this is a good consideration for us to add to what we're doing, or a new dimension maybe to add to what we're doing. So yeah, that's important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So with that, and again, I know for GVB, there's been a change of leadership. Christine is not on island right now. And then everybody's been hit with budget cuts, and I think GVB was the one that got the absolute largest budget cuts. And so I'm sure there's a whole lot of focus there on, just restructuring everything that's going to be happening over the next year, and everything else that's related to our situation. So I think it's good that we are able to meet. And what I'll do, I can move us to the next section. And in the next section, when we have open discussion, either now or in the open discussion, maybe GVB could talk a little bit about whether they're contemplating any rebranding, being able to hear from GVB in the past about their exercises in branding and how it has guided them over the years, and all the considerations that are really tied into that branding have been really, really helpful for all of us to hear. So I don't know if GVB has gotten that far in some of their discussions, but if either here, or if I just say that we're moving on to item 4 of the agenda, the open discussions, is there anything in that direction that makes you maybe think about some of what we're doing a little differently, Ms. Hernandez? Oh, if you could unmute yourself.
Sorry, yeah, my internet is actually like on, so sorry about that. But with our branding, it has come a long way. We started in 2009, and yes, a lot of people has grasped it. And yeah, and with the Guam Trade Commission, it's in the right direction. We are, co-hosting with it together. So yeah, and like right now with our budget cuts, we're being very, very creative. And of course, we're still moving forward, with our mission. So yeah, and then yes, we are working closely with our committee, our subcommittees to, of course, brand our trademark.
Yes. And yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of being part of this committee, that we'll be able to see the work that's going on in GVB that has many years, decades really, of experience in this kind of branding. And maybe the lessons or challenges are something that you or Christine or both of you can also be sharing with us, that we might need to consider about the trademark work that we're doing here, and how we might need to be thinking about it perhaps differently for the new landscape before us.
Okay, so, yeah, I'll put something together.
Yeah, just if there are elements that come up that you think would be helpful for us to hear about experiences, or anything that might lend us to think a little differently, just like with Mr. Baza, reminding us that we probably better think of this in a different format, with a lot more of it being digitally available than I might have thought in the past, or maybe the rest of us as well. Is there anything else that people would like to talk about in the open discussion? Any thoughts or anything? Yes, Dr. Sauter?
One of the discussions that we started, but we really haven't moved toward any decision yet on, is the idea of individual. Remember, we talked about the rights of individual artists, the interests of individual artists and practitioners, in comparison to the collective rights of indigenous people, right? So we haven't really gotten, we haven't taken that, I think, to the level that we need to address it in order to understand and determine. For example, when we talk about tangible and intangible properties, there are collective cultural properties that are linked with our indigeneity, and then there are properties that belong to people that might be a sacred site, right? Who are individual owners, or a family might own a particular area that the actual land in which a sacred site occurs. How are we thinking of that, and how will that have ramifications for for branding, for the process, the trademark process? Have we what I would be interested in hearing people's thoughts, because that will really inform also the way we give definition to tangible and intangible, in the context of collective interests versus individual interests. And we don't want to pit one against the other. And so, how do we work it so that we recognize that both exist?
I'm so glad that you brought that up. It really is multi-layered, because there can be, if we're talking about Chamorros as a people, you have Chamorros as a people, then you may have certain categories, for lack of a better term, within it, like Zoamti. So when we're talking about traditional medicine, is that something in the realm of Chamorros as a people? Is it in the realm of ownership of Zoamti? Are they family recipes that are, or mixtures or formulas? I'm not sure which is the most appropriate term, that are passed on within the family, and then do they belong to the family? You're right, those are very, very complex, and I'm sure people have different thoughts. One family might think about it one way, and other people might think about it another. And how do we tackle that in a Western legal framework? That's the other issue here, is Western or modern, at the very least, legal framework is its own situation. How do you take these intangibles and these things that used to be able to maybe flow in society organically, and then codify them? And a lot of this, I think, perhaps can be some of the discussion we've had before about making sure that we have some sort of body that can continue to think about or deal with these issues, so that if a person or a group or the people themselves are looking at something, there's a group that moves through space and time, and who are situated within the culture, at least since we're talking about the indigenous aspect of the trademark. I'm still thinking that has potential, but I know that you've looked at these frameworks, I think more than any of the rest of us, Dr. Do you have other thoughts on some of the models you've seen, or the ways that they've handled this? I know that there's still a lot to think about as well.
Where the challenge, we've looked at Alaska, what Alaska is doing, what Hawaii is doing. We've looked, of course, at what the Maoris were doing, but because they're an independent nation, it's a very different reality that they're operating under. But still, even within that context, the Maori interest and the individual entrepreneur interest often clashes, and that's why their own experience with the trademark has kind of imploded, right? They offered, or they proffered to the island communities what seemed like a very viable solution to this issue of trademarking, and then we learned later that they had so many problems because of the clash between, on the one hand, the indigenous cultural considerations and traditions, and on the other hand, the interest or rights of individual practitioners and artists. So I think we're going to have that same kind of challenge unless we clearly define our intent in each of those areas, because they do have the potential for conflict if they're not well defined and if they're not viewed as separate interests, but both viable interests, both legitimate interests. So it really is challenging. It really is challenging. The Commission is focusing on the cultural, traditional, collective indigenous rights, that platform, because we know that other committees are focusing on some of the individual artist and practitioner interests. I think the cultural committee is, right. So maybe just presenting the definitions and when we understand. I think the issue of misappropriation is particularly critical in the context of cultural imagery, right? And cultural and misuse of cultural symbols. So, but as Frank pointed out in an earlier session, Frank, if I heard you correctly, you were talking about the kinds of symbols that you've utilized in your creative work. You were talking about the fabric. He has, every artist has the right to be inspired by nature, which is what we're talking about when we talk about tangible and intangible property from an indigenous perspective. Then you also talked about knowledge, right? So there's intangible property is the knowledge that is attached to a tradition. So imantatasi, the navigators, who owns that knowledge? As you rightly raised the question of, is it everybody, or is it the practitioners of that particular knowledge, right? Like the zoamti, who owns that tradition? And if companies, we know this is happening in other parts of the world, that companies go in and they acquire the knowledge of making, like, say, ointments, that sort of thing, or creams, and then they go and they utilize that knowledge to create a mega multi-million-dollar business that does not advantage the people who actually inspired and created that knowledge. So how do we realistically create the balance?
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Senator, since you are the chair of the Trademark Commission, everything that Senator Sauder had mentioned is really very deep in terms of indigenous people. So do we rely on the commission, since you are the one chairing that committee, do we rely on the commission to eventually set up a definite definition of tangible and intangible, because like she mentioned, who owns that traditional knowledge? The traditional knowledge has been passed down from generations to generation. It is not a tangible, it's not an iconic image that was, that surfaced from the Gado caves in Irahan, the petroglyphs or whatever, and people are using that symbolically. Okay, it's a tangible image versus the traditional knowledge of all the aspects of the Chamorro culture, not just one particular aspect, be it in the weaving, in the carving, in the canoe sailing, or the performing arts, painting, things like that. So who do we rely on to give us? Because she is right. I've been involved with the Maori people, and yes, she is definitely accurate in stating that they did clash, because traditional knowledge is one thing and iconic images is another, that is produced by individual artists. So who do we rely to give us the guidance as committee members of your, do we rely on you to set that definition, or are you relying on us to set that definition?
Yeah, and this is why our discussion is so important. On one hand, it's very deep, these concepts, and I don't think that they're black and white anywhere. It's all kinds of shades of gray, if that works as an analogy. And it makes me think of when I worked in Palau, we collected what we call oral history. And so I had really liked that concept there. Instead of saying myths or legends or something like that, if it came from an appropriate rubak or ma'as, a respected elder, then it was history. It just was orally preserved and orally transmitted. And so we really worked to create language, because we did it, we were getting US grant money. So we made sure that the Palauan version was first, and then we had the English translation. And so we did a couple of things. One is that we said that if there's any discrepancy, the Palauan version is the most accurate, because that was as close to verbatim from the elder as we could get it. And then also we made sure to say that that knowledge belonged to that village or that family or that clan, whatever was correct, and that they should always be consulted when looking at that oral history, because history, even in the Western sense, it's more fluid than we act like it is. We act like you can write it down and it's a permanent, agreed upon thing. But history changes all the time for a variety of reasons. And it's the same with oral history. So the best that we came up with in the time that I was working there was to situate it with that. There are certain things that are very, very well understood and very well defined in Palau. Absolutely, that certain authorities reside with the state, that certain authorities would reside with title holders, with families, with clans, and things like that. So as much as possible, we would, as I said, recognize the true authority who owned this, and that they should be sought after, because if somebody wanted to use that oral history, they really needed to go back to whomever was holding that title or whoever was representing that clan or that village at the time, because the way that they say it or present it or some other facet of it might change. And it needed to always be recognized as the most valid and true and authentic and owned by that source. So, I don't know if that helps us in our discussion, but there might be ways that we can continue to think about this, about maybe how to root it in a way where it allows for the possible organicity that it needs. Yeah, I think perhaps we could think along those ways, but it has to come from the Chamorro perspective, so it has to be accurate there. I can only speak to some of the things that I've attempted to do or experienced elsewhere, and it may or may not be a good fit for here or fit within the Chamorro perspective. But you know, one of the things that came to my mind was some, you know, along with all of the challenges and hurdles that come with COVID-19 and all our social distancing and other, one of the things I think that has actually opened up is to be able to have these meetings and conferences and other things across the political boundaries. So I might see what I can do, and anybody in here, you know, can do the same thing. If we can think of someone we might want to have a lecture from, or a presentation from, or some training from, or, you know, maybe there's a UN representative, even though we don't fit within the UN, we do, and we fit within the UN in some ways, and we don't in some other ways, but we might be able to access someone from the UN who has interacted with other communities, especially in the Pacific. A lot of Pacific communities have been very, very active because their traditions are so important to them. And as Dr. Sauter said, and Tun Rabon has mentioned in the past, that they're very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable to outside sources that want to do other things with them. And so there has been a lot of activity. So maybe amongst all of us, we can think in our working groups about if there's somebody we want to try to invite that maybe has tackled some of these issues with other communities as well. Dr. Sauter?
I just suggest that that's a great idea, and I think that if we can get, excuse me, if we can get folks who are like somebody from Alaska, from the First Peoples in Alaska, from other First Nation peoples that are in the northern coastal areas of the U.S. You know, like I know the Navajo has done some significant work. They might, you know, they might be able to offer us some perspective. Also, the UNESCO folks, because they're this is, you know, they've put out UNESCO, I don't remember when, it might have been 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, that they put out a whole series of books on culture and cultural practices or cultural considerations from the different island nation groups. I know Samoa has also done some very very clear-cut things about, for example, the genealogy of the sacredness of genealogies, of family genealogies, clan genealogies. And then Hawaii, of course, Hawaii has figured out how to circumnavigate the federal law, which I think for our purposes is important because that's the reality, our current reality, right? So we can learn a lot from how they've been able to do that. And they take the intangible properties and sacred rights component very, very seriously. So I think we can benefit from hearing from them.
Can I comment again? And this, I like to address this to all the panel members. In my experiences with the indigenous people from the Pacific, the Asian countries, the Native Americans, the commonality that they all have is that there's a tribal council or a council of the elders that are in control of a lot of those things. And that's why they're able to address some of the issue. Even to this day, it still exists. And they work hand in hand with the government, okay? But the government doesn't really go interfere and dictate to them how they want to define their tangible and intangible sacredness of their production or their rights. So one thing that we lost here on our island, and I started to realize it after the 60s, is that the elders in the villages are no longer that the importance. We have a semblance that happens, and that's the village mayor, but we don't have a semblance of any elders or any importance that can give us that because in the past, prior to the modernization of Guam, the elders were very important in making decisions within the villages, within the way of life. That is what's happening in a lot, and they're starting to recognize the importance of the indigenous way of life in all aspects, in all culture, in all race. And I'm pretty sure that that's what we need to come together and realize, because we lack that in our Chamorro community here on Guam right now. And therefore we rely on the government all the time, whether it be Department of Chamorro Affairs or legislature or GVB, to set the standards. And sometimes those standards are not applicable to we, the practitioners who are providing the products and the services that is required as Indigenous people.
That is extremely important for us to hear. And you're reminding me, you know, I did appreciate my time in Palau because I felt like I experienced and learned so much. And it's one of the differences, or it's the set of differences, because their colonial history, their decolonization history, it was such a different path. And part of that was for all of the rest of Micronesia outside of the Marianas, it was like about 200 years less of intensive colonization. By the time colonization happened for places like Palau, it wasn't until, like I said, nearly 200 years after all of this very intensive and, in my assessment, quite frankly, medieval types of missionization had been happening here. And I think that spells out for some real differences, and then in the way that they've been able to frame their government. So in each of their states, they have, and each state decides for themselves, amongst themselves, their particular setup. They will have their own configuration and formula for how many of the traditional title holders will be part of the government and how many will be elected. And so there's always that balance of traditional title holders and government, but working together in some way. And in the office that I worked in, their particular historic preservation office, there are 16 states in Palau, and there were about 11 of us staff. But it's very important in Palau that each state had its own representative, because no state has the right to speak for another state, right? You just wouldn't do that. That wouldn't be proper protocol. So we were 11 staff, and we had 32 board members and oversight, because one set of board members was 16, one per state, and that was the appointed board members, but one per state. And then the other, and I'm really glad you brought it up, Tunrubon, because you're making me think about this. And you're right, it is missing for Guam, and we maybe have a lot to benefit from thinking about how to bring something like this up. The other advisory body or oversight body were our historians. And there was one elder known for their wealth of knowledge about the village and about the village's oral history and about just, you know, all kinds of things to do with the village or about life in general and about cultural protocols. But I can really see a value. We do still have traditional historians, and I would hate for us to ever lose that. So there may be some value for making sure that a body like that does formally get together and maybe even is part of work like this moving forward. Yeah, so yeah, both very important things for us to think about and maybe see if they can work for us. So maybe for Dr. Souder and I, maybe we can work together to see if we can get somebody to come and talk with us. I mean, yeah, I think hearing from other groups that have gone farther down this path than we have thus far, they could tell us a lot about how that journey has been. So a very productive discussion, I think. And I'm also thinking that what I might do is the way that this commission is established is and I guess maybe many commissions are established in this way, that they may or may not make it into the next legislature. And I do want to guarantee that these kind of conversations, the progress that we've made continues on. So I may reach out to the different working subcommittees to see about what might be done to make sure that you and all the work that you've done and all the progress we've made does continue, so that we continue to make this progress and the people of Guam really benefit from everything that we're putting together and thinking through at this time. Are there any other thoughts that we have in our open discussion?
Yeah, Senator, can I just bring up something? This
Sure.
is Joe Santos. Yeah, you know, back in the Department of Chamorro Affairs had published a book called The Chamorro Heritage, A Sense of Place. It actually provides the guidelines, procedures, and recommendations for authenticating what Chamorro heritage is. And I really believe that each of you or each of the members need to read that, because it actually sets a lot of guidelines as to what is and how we're going to deal with what is Chamorro. The book lays it out. There were a lot of contributors to this book, this publication, and I suggest that it be read by each of the members, and then because a lot of the issues that you discussed there, you talked about across the board, is actually in this particular book. Right,
and you weren't here at the earlier discussions, but it's good that you're here and you're bringing that back up, and then Mas Gahulu Santos is here, because we had talked about, if it's possible, from DCA to get a copy for each of the board members so that they can look at it and we can think about the ways that it might informed or be incorporated or be part of the type of work that we're doing. So if that's possible, I think several of us do have a copy of it, but not everybody does. And if it's possible, I think that would be greatly helpful to see how some of this work has been looked at before, how some of these topics have been looked at before, and it provides guidance as to that previous effort as well.
Senator, if I may ask, can I please know who needs it? We have a very limited number of copies. Yeah. I'm not sure what we have, but I know we have very few. But I'd like to share it with the commission members. I just need to know if anybody has a copy, you know, just.
So I have
copies, let me know.
And maybe we can give it out like one per agency so that it belongs to the agency's like reference library. And then that way, you know, if Christine is here or if Dee is here, both have access to it as needed. So I have a copy. Yeah, does GVB, do you know, Dee,
we don't have
GVB has a copy?
No, we don't have a copy.
Several members of the commission have personal copies, but we don't have a commission copy. So we could maybe you can provide the Commission, if you know Zamora, with a copy for our archive.
I know Anne-Marie took a full set. It's so I know she took a full set of the
That's good.
Helena
Yeah,
series.
so then she will have the.
Yes,
I haven't
yes.
been to I haven't seen our live set since COVID, but yeah, but we are familiar with the work. Thank you, Joe, for that. We are familiar, and we have gone. The Commission, anyway, has gone through and looked at the work. The Culture Committee of the Commission has looked at the work several years back, and we were also conscious that we might need to update. And so part of the work that we're doing now, is really to reimagine and recontextualize in the context of nation building and in the context of decolonization. So those are two other movements that give us impetus to rethink and redefine for ourselves, not to take the standard operating definition of the federal government, but to rethink for ourselves what these concepts might mean. So that's great.
Is there anybody else that needs a copy? Any agency?
Does Gita probably needs a copy, and then maybe Kaha doesn't have a copy. But the good thing there is, no matter who is showing up to represent that entity, it's just one copy per entity, and then they have it in their library.
Yeah, will do.
Okay, and Guampedia probably has it. They're also part of this, but Guampedia likely does, but we can double check with Rita. Yeah.
Okay, I will work on that.
Yes, very good discussion, and good for us to get back on track on that, because we had discussed it earlier, but it's true, not everybody has a copy of it, and I think it will be helpful for everybody to see what past efforts have been. That's always, I'm a historian, that's always important to look at what all the efforts in the past have been, so that we're always building upon and moving forward in that way. So very good. And let me go ahead. So with that, if we've exhausted all of the discussion for the open discussion portion of our agenda, we can move on to item 5. Item 5 is that we have no further items for discussion, and can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Gof Malik, and then a second?
Second.
Gof Malik. So we have Ms. Gehulu Santos with the motion and Ms. Hernandez with the second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
So.
Aye.
Yeah, so I believe I can note that Ms. Hernandez, Dr. Sauder, Tunarabone, Mascahulu Santos, and Mr. Baza have all confirmed an aye. So with that, the Guam Trademark Commission meeting is now adjourned. Seduas Maasi for your attendance and participation in today's virtual Guam Trademark Commission meeting. The time is now 6:12, but I also want to just wish everybody well and safety, and please entreat you all to download that COVID-19 contact tracing app if you have not. It's going to be really, really helpful to get us out of PCOR 1 and to get us back to having a more normal life if we can contact trace more efficiently. So please, please download that. We've got about 60,000 people left to convince. So if you can all help me convince somebody else, we'll get there eventually. But have a good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for such thoughtful discussion, as always, for everyone who's here. Esta.